The Theory of Moral Sentiments by Adam Smith. Part 1. Of the Propriety of Actions, consisting of 3 sections. Section 2. Of the degrees of the different passions which are consistent with propriety. Chapter 5. Of the selfish passions. Besides those two opposite sets of passions, the social and unsocial, there is another, which holds a sort of middle place between them, is never either so graceful as is sometimes the one set, nor is ever so odious as is sometimes the other. Grief and joy, when conceived upon account of our own private good or bad fortune, constitute this third set of passions. Even when excessive, they are never so disagreeable as excessive resentment, because no opposite sympathy can ever interest us against them; and when most suitable of their objects, they are never so agreeable as impartial humanity, and just benevolence. Because no double sympathy can ever interest us for them, there is, however, this difference between grief and joy, that we are generally most disposed to sympathize with small joys and great sorrows. The man who, by some sudden revolution of fortune, is lifted up at once into the condition of life greatly above what he had formerly lived, may be assured that the congratulations of his best friends are not all of them perfectly sincere. An upstart, though, is the great merit, is generally disagreeable, and the sentiment of envy commonly prevents us from heartily sympathizing with his joy. If he has any judgment, he is sensible of this, and instead of appearing to be elated with his good fortune, he endeavors as much as he can to smother his joy, and to keep down that elevation of mind with which his new circumstances naturally inspire him. He affects the same plainness of dress and the same modesty of behavior, which became him in his former station. He redoubles his attention to his old friends, and endeavors more than ever to be humble, assiduous, and complacent. And this is the behavior which in his situation we most approve of, because we expect it. It seems that he should have more sympathy with our envy and aversion to his happiness than we have with his happiness. It is seldom that with all this he succeeds. We suspect the sincerity of his humility as he grows weary of this constraint. In a little time, therefore, he generally leaves all his old friends behind him, some of the meanest of them excepted, who may perhaps condescend to become his dependents, nor does he always acquire any new ones. The pride of his new connections is as much affronted at finding him their equal, as that of his old ones had been by becoming their superior, and it requires the most obstinate and persevering modesty to atone for this mortification to either. He generally grows weary too soon, and is provoked by the sullen and suspicious pride of the one, and by the saucy contempt of the other, to treat the first with neglect and the second with petulance, till at last he grows habitually insolent, and forfeits the esteem of all. If the chief part of human happiness arises from the consciousness of being beloved, as I believe it does, those sudden changes of fortune seldom contribute much to happiness. He is happiest who advances more gradually to greatness, whom the public destines to every step of his preferment long before he arrives at it, in whom upon that account when it comes it can excite no extravagant joy, and with regard to whom it cannot reasonably create either any jealousy in those he overtakes, or any envy in those he leaves behind. Mankind, however, more readily sympathize with those smaller joys, which flow from less important causes. It is decent to be humble amidst a great prosperity, but we can scarce express too much satisfaction in all the little occurrences of common life. In the company with which we spent the evening last night, in the entertainment that was set before us, in what was said and what was done, in all the little incidents of the present conversation, and in all those frivolous nothings which fill up the void of human life, nothing is more graceful than habitual cheerfulness, which is always founded upon a peculiar relish for all the little pleasures which common occurrences afford. We readily sympathize with it, it inspires us with the same joy, and makes every trifle turn up to us in the same agreeable aspect, in which it presents itself to the person endowed with this happy disposition. Hence it is that youth, the season of gaiety, so easily engages our affections, that propensity to joy which seems even to animate the bloom and to sparkle from the eyes of youth and beauty, though in a person of the same sex, exalts even the aged to a more joyous mood than ordinary. They forget, for a time, their infirmities, and abandon themselves to those agreeable ideas and emotions, to which they have long been strangers, but which, when the presence of so much happiness recalls them to their breast, take their place there, like an old acquaintance, from whom they are sorry to have ever been parted, and whom they embrace more heartily upon the account of this separation. It is quite otherwise with grief. Small vexations excite no sympathy, but deep afflictions calls forth the greatest. The man who is made uneasy by every little disagreeable incident, who is hurt if either the cook or the butler have failed in the least article of their duty, who feels every defect in the highest ceremonial of politeness, whether it be shown to himself or to any other person, who takes it amiss that his intimate friend did not bid him good morrow when they met in the forenoon, and that his brother hummed a tune all the time he himself was telling a story, who put it out of humour by the badness of the weather when in the country, by the badness of the roads when upon a journey, and by the want of company and the dulness of all public diversions when in town, such a person, I say, though he should have some reason, will seldom meet with such sympathy. Joy is a pleasant emotion, and we gladly abandon ourselves to it upon the slightest occasion. We readily, therefore, sympathize with it in others, whenever we are not prejudiced by envy. But grief is painful, and the mind, even when it is our own misfortune, naturally resists and recoils from it. We would endeavour either not to conceive it at all, or to shake it off as soon as we have conceived it. Our aversion to grief will not, indeed, always hinder us from conceiving it in our own case upon very trifling occasions, but it constantly prevents us from sympathizing with it in others when excited by the frivolous causes, for our sympathetic passions are always less irresistible than our original ones. There is, besides, a malice in mankind, which not only prevents all sympathy with little uneasiness, but renders them in some measure diverting. Hence the delight which we all take in raillery, and in the small vexation which we observe in our companion, when he is pushed and urged and teased upon all sides. Men of the most ordinary good breeding dissemble the pain which any little incident may give them, and those who are more thoroughly formed to society, turn, of their own accord, all such incidents into raillery, as they know their companions will do for them. The habit which a man who lives in the world has acquired of considering how everything that concerns himself will appear to others, makes those frivolous calamities turn up in the same ridiculous light to him in which he knows they will certainly be considered by them. Our sympathy, on the contrary, with deep distress is very strong and very sincere. It is unnecessary to give an instance. We weep even at the feigned representation of a tragedy. If you labour, therefore, under any signal calamity, if by some extraordinary misfortune you are fallen into poverty, into diseases, into disgrace and disappointment, even though your own fault may have been, in part, the occasion, yet you may generally depend upon the sincerest sympathy of all your friends, and, as far as interest and honour will permit, upon their kindest assistance too. But if your misfortune is not of this dreadful kind, if you have only been a little balked in your ambition, if you have only been jilted by your mistress, or are only henpecked by your wife, lay your account with the raillery of all your acquaintance.